In exercise 1, you're given the option to download some base map data in the form of imagery or topo maps that you might want to use to enhance your GPS data that you're collecting. It sort of gives a spatial reference so we can see where it is located and more easily. And to do this, I find it very handy to have some references that will help me locate that imagery. Unless you're already familiar with the file names and stuff for your specific area that you're working with, then you may have a little trouble at first trying to find this base mapping data. So on our Momentum site, I've placed a section, a module in the contents section called data sources. And I'll have a file called the TopoQuad index, and you don't see it here, but I'll also have a file called county data. And these files, you might want to go ahead and download those files and store them on your hard drive. And when you do this, I recommend that you create a folder on your hard drive, somewhere on your C drive, not in the My Documents, and this is important. You want to store it on your C drive itself, and create a folder called GIS210 and put your first and last initial. That will give you an 8-character file name. You don't want to go over 8 characters, and you don't want to have any spaces in this folder name. And we'll talk more about this in the one-on-one class as to why that is. But just create that folder, and that gives you a personalized folder for this class. Inside that folder, go ahead and create a subfolder called EX1 for exercise 1, and that is the folder that you'll want to download that data into. And now when you download yours, it will initially be zipped up. You'll have to unzip it with the zipping program that you've installed. And when you unzip the tuple indices, you'll actually get a set of files that looks more like this. And you'll have the 1 to 250,000 scale and the 1 to 100,000 scale, as well as the 1 to 24,000 scale. This 24,000 scale is real handy because it is what we call the 7.5 minute topo series, the familiar topographic maps that you see everywhere. A lot of them are based on this 1 to 24,000 scale. And so what I would suggest you do is copy that set of files, and you can sort this alphabetically so that you can get all of the files together in one spot and make it easier to select all of the Topo Q24 related files. And copy that and paste that into your EX1. And if you've done it already by installing it in EX1 and unzipped it, then you might want to just move those files out, and you can put them in your 210 folder by creating another subfolder if you like, and just call that maybe BaseData. And that might be where you store your original archives of all of the base mapping data that you get that you later use in other projects. It's always a good idea to keep backups. So anyway, you should end up with something like this in your EX1 folder, and you see I've got the counties file downloaded and unzipped. And now once that is finished, then you're ready to load that reference data into ArcMap. I've already started a session here to save time. And let's go ahead and load first the topo quad indices data. And you see here that I have a set of some kind of files for the contiguous 48 states. If I zoom in on that, just to explore a little bit here and zoom in around the area of Tennessee, you'll see that it's actually a series of squares. If I view my attribute table, I can see that what I really have is about 53,000, almost 54,000 records. That's how many TopoQuad indexes, or how many TopoQuads exist for just the contiguous 48 states. So it's amazing the amount of detail they have. And in this file you're given, it's very handy because you're given some information. You've got the USGS identifier code for those files. You've got the quad name, which is very handy. This is the main identifier for that quad, and it's got other information. For example, which state it's located in, or in some cases a quad may overlap states, so they've put up to 3 or 4 states that you could have there. When that was revised last, when it was originally published, and just some various miscellaneous type information. The biggest thing is the quad name. That's what you'll use, because on a lot of the sites like this Tennessee Spatial Data Server, the quad name is actually what they use to identify the files with. So what we'll do now is go ahead and let's load the county data. But first, just to maintain consistency, I'm going to zoom back out here to the extent of that file. And we'll now load the counties layer. And actually, if we load the layer, the difference between a layer, the .lyr, and the various other formats, like in this case, it's a file called SDC, which is a special type of compression that Esri has. You won't see these files a lot. I have some of these as base data that you're sharing now, but typically you'll be using what we call a shape file, and the shape file ending in .shp. And what you can do is basically attach a layer file to a shape file or an SDC file or any other main type of data file. So just sort of think of this .lyr as the symbology associated with that layer. So if we load it as such, then it will apply its symbology that it has already for us. And you can see that it's roughly similar to the outline of the topo quads. You see some overlap going just outside the boundaries there with the topo quads. I don't know if that's various islands or what. I would assume it is. But anyway, from this, now that we have the counties, we can see a lot more detail. And let's just say, for an example, I'm going to pick where I live in Cumberland County, and I'm going to say I want to identify a certain quad that might be near the city of Crossville. And I know approximately where that is. So I'm going to zoom in. And I could do a search, which you'll learn more about searching later. But for now, let's just zoom in. And you can see when I zoom in that they've attached symbology and labels already to that county file. I could turn those labels on or off, but it's kind of handy. I can see there's Cumberland County. And I don't have the cities on here, but I know that Crossville is approximately in the middle of the county. Now, it might help to get a cities file, and I'll probably go ahead and post a base data file for cities as well on our site that you might want to download, that you could load and give you a little more reference. But from this, I can now turn on the topo quads, and actually they're turned on the whole time. They're just moved into the background. So let me move them up into the foreground, and at first they're kind of going to dominate the scene, but I'm going to go ahead and make that symbology clear on that quad layer by clicking on the little pink area there. And let's pick the hollow, and let's increase our outline width just a little bit so that they'll show up a little better, and say OK. And now you can see that we've got the topo quad indices laid over top of this county layer, and we can go ahead and turn on the labels for those topo quads. And a shortcut to do this in this case would be to right click and just say label features. And that's because the attribute table, that name field, is already associated with the labels for this particular file. That won't always be the case. Sometimes you'll have to go about it a little bit differently to turn that on. But for this case, it works fine. And so now we can see the name of the actual quad indices. And it looks like if we tick right near the center of the county, we're probably either talking about Crossville or Dorton. And it's sort of intuitive that the Crossville would probably be the one that we would want. So that identifies that quad name. And so now we've got some information that we can go out there and collect some or obtain some base data from. So we know the quad that we're looking for. In this case, it's called Crossville. And again, just to reemphasize, any other landmark data files that you might obtain, cities, streams, any other types of mostly vector data that you will might come across that could be handy for referencing things will help you to identify specific quad names and stuff, especially in areas you might not be familiar with. And you might get things like boundaries as well. Like if you're looking for a certain spot in a national park, you might get a file that has all of the park boundaries in it, and then you could real easily see the quads that you're looking for. If I wanted to know all of the quads in Cumberland County, it'd be pretty easy to visually go through and pick out the roughly 12 or 14 or so of them that it would take to cover all of the county. And there are other ways to actually select those using the county boundary as a feature to do that with too. And we'll look at some examples of doing that in the coming weeks as well. So for now, we know we're looking for the Crossville quad. So let's go ahead and minimize the ArcMap session for the moment and open up our Internet Explorer or Firefox, whichever browser that you're using. And we'll go over to a site called www.tngis.org. That's the Tennessee Spatial Data Server. And the way they have their site organized, you can read about it, just basic information about the site and so forth. Or you can go right into data collections, and this will take us to a page that shows all the different types of data that they have. And if you scroll near the bottom, you'll see that they have what we call DOQQs for digital ortho quarter quads, and they have something called digital raster graphics, or DRGs. And again, we'll talk a lot about this, especially in the 101 class, and what the acronyms mean and so forth. But if I wanted to get an aerial image, then I would want to go to the DOQs here. And there's a variety of ways you can download them. And as you get a little further advanced, you might eventually want to get into the counties. They're very large files, and so I would discourage you from getting that right now. Instead, I would focus on the quad, which is the whole reason that we looked that up a little while ago. And you can see that they've got them organized in a couple different ways here. One again here at the county level, and they've got what they call the NAIP imagery. But let's just go right here to the download DOQs by quad. And something important to notice is this geographic 83. That's the projection that they are stored in, and you want to take a note of that, because later you're going to have to define a projection for these files, and that's the information you'll want to use. And geographic, think of that for now as decimal degrees. I know a lot of this doesn't make a lot of sense to those of you new to the GIS right now, but it will very soon. But just think of geographic as decimal degrees, and 1983 is what we call the datum. Okay, we'll talk more about that later. So we'll go ahead and follow this link, and it should take us to a list of quad maps for the entire state of Tennessee, and they're organized alphabetically. And so now you can see why it was important to have that topo index, because you'd be sorting through thousands of these things trying to find them. You talk about finding a needle in a haystack. So let's scroll down to Crossville, and you'll see here Crossville zip. And I'm gonna right click on that, and when I notice right click, not left. If I right click, I'm given a little window with some options, and one of them is save target as. So I'll select that one, and that basically lets me pick the folder I want to save that file to. And I'm going to select the folder that we created a little while ago, and I'm going to go into exercise 1, and I'm going to let it fall into there. And notice that it already remembered the name was crossville.zip. So I'll start the download. It's about 8 megs in size, so it's going to take a minute, so I'm going to pause the video for just a few minutes until it downloads. Okay, now that that file has downloaded, we will go into our file manager. Actually, it's still downloading. I thought it was finished. Once the file finished downloading, we'll need to go into the folder that we stored it in and unzip that program. So let's do that now. You can see the file there that we downloaded, and I'm going to right click and open it with WinZip and extract and tell it to store it in that folder. And if I drag this out of the way, you can see where it added the files. It's a little bit of a misnomer. The site called it a DOQQ. It was really a DOQ. The difference is the DOQQ takes one quadrangle and splits it into 4 subquadrangles identified with northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. And it tends to save on file size, because sometimes you're only needing a quarter section of a quad, and so they have that as the title, but it's DOQs. Actually, it's what were downloaded there. So we've got the file there, and we can now go into Art Catalog so that we can, what we call, identify or define a projection for that file. And if you remember that I told you that you need to note that it was saying geographic 83, and that's because you're going to use that projection information to define that projection. In this case, I've gone ahead and checked, and the file has already been defined for us. So you do not have to define those files. The way you would check about that, and we'll talk about this more this week again in our 101 class because the topics is going to be on projections, but you would select the file, go to metadata, and select the spatial subtab. And if you see a reference in here, then you know it's been defined. If it's blank or contains very little information, none of it related to geographic coordinate systems and things like that, then you know that you have to define that projection. So this one's already been defined for us, so we do not have to redefine it. We're good to go. So we can now go ahead and open up ArcMap, which we already have open from our previous session, and we can pull that file into the ArcMap program. So I'm going to add the data file and select the Crossville SID, which SID basically just another type of file formatting. It's very efficient at compressing files. And let that load, and it loads underneath all of these other layers, so we're not seeing that layer. So let's go ahead and make the counties clear like we did with the topo quad indices previously. And just to differentiate them from the quad index, let's select a little bit of a different color. Let's just go with like a red. How about that? And there we can see that we've got the county boundary with all the quads, and there the Crossville DOQ sits right neatly inside the Crossville quad like it should. And so now we would have a reference, and this was assuming that my GPS data was here in Crossville area. Then I would have a base map. If I zoom in, I can see some familiar features if you're familiar with this area. So this would give an interesting backdrop to my GPS data. And if I zoom in a little further on one of the lakes here, this is probably Lake Tansy, but you can see that the photo is fairly sharp. These, I believe, are 1 meter resolution photos, so you can actually get right down into neighborhoods and see. You can start to see the resolution break down a little bit there. But had I GPS this road, for example, I would see hopefully a nice neat line along this road right here. That would give both the spatial context of where I was located, as well as verify the accuracy of the data that I collected in this case. So that's it for this one. There's an example of how you can obtain some base data, and we will talk a lot more about this in the course and as well in the 101 class. So just wanted to give you a chance to get a little jump start on things and try it out. If you haven't already downloaded something, go ahead and try it out. Even if you've turned in your project, you might want to go ahead and try this out and see if you have luck with it. And if you have any questions, send me an email and let me know.